Hey, I'm here to do my June wrap up. June was a great month for reading. I enjoyed almost every book that I read. First things first, I read a personal memoir called The House at Sugar Beach by Helene Cooper. And this tells the story of a young girl growing up in Liberia before the Civil War started, and how her family had to flee when there was the coup that happened in 1980. I enjoyed this book quite a bit. It gave me a new perspective of the tumultuous history of Liberia, and it was just really stellar. I talked about it in the first video of my coming back to BookTube. But The House at Sugar Beach, if you're looking for a memoir that's just moving and gives you a bit of insight into Liberian history, you should check that out. The next story I read was The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. Absolutely loved her debut novel, The Mothers, and so I was super excited to get this book, and it did not disappoint. I did a review of it, so you can check that out. But this book tells the story of these twins who come from this really small town where everyone is light-skinned, and one sister takes another path, and she's passing as a white woman, and the other sister marries a dark-skinned black man, and her life takes on a different trajectory that brings her back home. And then the whole story just develops as far as secrets that they're keeping, abandonment issues, and just what happens with the next generation. I absolutely love this novel. I talked about it, and I think that it brought about a lot of interesting perspectives, especially with what's going on right now. And it was really funny because I had this whole reflection on what's going on, and this might be a little bit of a rant, but it's so interesting, whenever tragedy strikes, and especially, when we have to start shouting from the rooftops that Black Lives Matter, and there's just all of this racial discourse that's traveling through the airwaves. And I think that we don't pay attention enough to what happens in the imagination. There's a saying that D.L. Hughley says where he's like, the most dangerous place for a black person is in a white person's imagination. And just reflecting on, I watched the late night, I think it's the Late Night with Seth Meyers, and it was really funny because he has this bit that's going with the books in his attic where it's been like the Thorn Birds or something that just the title keeps changing. And for a couple of weeks, he just had books by Black authors. There was like Zadie Smith and Marlon James, Jesse. And I was like, oh, that's really cool, that he's alternating the books. But then the books went away, and it was like back to normal or back to business or back to, the Thornberry or whatever the name of that book is. And I'm not knocking Seth Meyers or anything like that, but I just thought it was so interesting because it just mirrored exactly what we talk about when we talk about inclusion and diversity, in that Black people's lives, Black people's stories, it's not just something that's trending for a while and then we put it back on the shelf, or, we dedicate 1 month to reading diversely, and then the rest of the time we can just keep reading the same authors or consuming the same stories over and over again, because then we relegate Black stories to just being about tragedy, to just being about sociology, to just being about Black death, and not really understanding or giving ourselves the space to take in the the multitudes of experiences that Black people have. Think of how you have to change your imagination, your literary imagination, your political imagination, and start moving in that direction. So it's like, not only are people out there telling these incredible stories, but make sure that you're reading them not just at one point during the year, but that it just becomes habitual. Like every week or month that you go into a bookstore, when you're ordering your books, you're not just saying, oh, this is the time for me to choose a Black story. It also makes me think of this one time I was working at Barnes & Noble, and this lady came in and she was looking for a mystery book to give to a friend, and I recommended Attica Locke, and she just looked at the blurb in the back and she's like, oh, it's not, and she doesn't want to read about like a Black story or something like that, to that effect. And it was just like, it's amazing that even looking at someone knowing they want to read a mystery book, as soon as it has Black title or anything that's like Black history related, it's like, oh no, it's not the time to read it. And so I just encourage people to remember Black Lives Matter and Black books matter and Black imagination, and just think a bit more deeply about these things. And I can't believe I just went on that whole rant, but let's keep going. The next book that I read was Book of the Little Axe by Lauren Francis Sharma. This tells the story of a girl, her name is Rosa, and she's just not fitting in her time period in 1796 or something like that. And then she ends up living in like these native lands in America. And when her son's coming of age, there's all of these questions that arise from this incident that happens in the beginning of the book. And so Rosa takes her son with her back through her history and traces her steps back so that he understands a bit more of where he came from. Francis Sharma does a really great job of like describing the environment, and it's like such a rich experience when you're reading it, because she's like giving you the details of like every taste and every smell, and just the cliffs that are off in the distance, and even the names of the native characters, and it's all really just enriching. And it took a while for me to get through the beginning, but I stuck it out, and I think that the ending made up for how difficult it was to get through the beginning. But it was a cool novel, very original, very imaginative. So Book of the Little Axe. And then I read The Housing Lark by Sam Selvin. This book was hilarious. It tells the story of this group of men. They're all from Trinidad, and they are in this Caribbean immigrant neighborhood in London. And I mean, they are just these big dreamers, but all they do is drink rum and and fool around and look for women. And so it's a lot of their dialogue and their personalities just like coming off the page. They take on this idea that they can buy a house if they just save their money. But at first they have to stop buying cigarettes all the time and, you know, be responsible. But can they do it is the big question. They give their money to this one guy who's supposed to give it to his sister, but she never ends up seeing the money. And he's like spending the money, and then ends up having another half-brain scheme of starting a bus excursion throughout London. And it is the most hilarious trip ever. And it's just so rich with Caribbean culture and Caribbean dialect, and the food, the laughter, the music, and an incredible experience. And this is a classic, and I understand why. And it's very short. It's about 120 pages. You could definitely read it in a weekend. It's so funny. It is so funny. And it speaks a lot to people having these big, grandiose dreams, but never following through. And it's like, there's a theme of these women coming in to save the day, and having the work ethic necessary for the dreams that these men dream up. But I love it. I love it so much. And then I read Sugar by Bernice L. McFadden. And to say that I love this book is completely an understatement. I remember the first time I read Bernice L. McFadden, and I was just like, oh, okay. And, you know, just traveling through her other novels and like the way that she does historical fiction. And I was like, oh, I have to read everything. And every year since then, I think it was 2016, I've read at least one McFadden book a year. And I think it's like a fun little tradition. And Sugar just blew me away. I believe it's her debut novel that came out obviously 20 years ago, because this is the 20th anniversary version. And it tells the story of this lady. Her name is Sugar Lacey, and she moves to this town in Bigelow, Arkansas, next door to a woman named Pearl Taylor. And it tells the story of how their friendship forms. But as the story progresses, all of these secrets about their town and about both of their lives start to unfold. And you see that they're so much more connected than it seems in the beginning, and why their connection becomes so much more of a profound read once you learn more of the secrets. And I just think that there's so much to take away from this book. Like when you read novels and you sit down with it and every single thing that you recall just reminds you of why it hit you so hard in the gut, or just incredible. I love this book and totally understand why people say it's their favorite. If you haven't read Sugar by Bernice L. McFadden, you should definitely put that on your TBR right now. And I continue to read Deacon King Kong by James McBride. This again, I will probably, I could go on that whole rant about the literary imagination and why Black books deserve to be on your TBR. This book is hilarious. I'm reading it with the Oprah's Book Club. This is my first time, I believe, like being on time with an Oprah's Book Club choice and not having read it before, or not really caring to pick up the book. But I'm enjoying it because I'm reading, you know, the segmented chapters at the same time as everyone else, and it's allowing me to like pause and savor those few chapters and then like dive right back into the book and see how those themes start to pop out a bit more, and with the knowledge of what the themes were as it's going. And it's cool. I'm like taking my time and reading with people, which is what the digital book clubbing community is all about, isn't it? So Deacon King Kong, I'm still reading that. I'm looking forward to reading in July Kindred by Octavia Butler. I'm going to be joining the Octavia Butler Slow Read Along, and I will link down below where you can find out more information on that. And yeah, and then I have some more books that I picked up last month that I didn't get to, so I'm gonna do that. Let me know what you are reading, what you did read in June, anything that you can recommend. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, remember to read or be read, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.